Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, go ahead and let us know where you're from. We've got somebody from Southern California. Welcome. Grateful you guys are with us. No doubt we'll have a few more people joining us as we go along here. But let's see. I think it is time. So we're going to go ahead and officially kick this off. This is Jared Sorensen with Ag Steward is the name of our company. This is the Profitable Steward Podcast and Ag Steward webinar that we do twice a month. If you're new, if anybody's new here to Ag Steward, just go ahead and let us know in the chat if this is your very first webinar. So we do these things live and then we pull the audio and it goes on podcast channels. We like to pull in experts from regenerative agriculture field and support the cause of regeneration. And that's really a mission of Ag Steward, is to regenerate more acres, keep more family farmers and ranchers on the land. There's a huge shift happening already amongst individuals who are retiring. And it's been predicted that 50% of land ownership is going to transfer in the next decade. And so we have an opportunity here to either move towards further consolidation, or, if we can prove out that farming and ranching can be profitable, sustainable, can be fun, and a good family lifestyle as well, I think we can see more family farms thrive. But it's going to take a concerted effort, and we certainly at Ag Steward are playing a small part in that effort. Joe Morris is here with us today. We're grateful that he's able to be here with us. I've known Joe for, I think we first met, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but we met at a Bud Williams clinic outside of Elko, Nevada, which was in actually just a few miles from our home is where it was hosted. And I think that was in somewhere around 2008, 9, somewhere in there. I don't know. It was obviously one of the last ones that he did in a stockmanship class. And then I think we've crossed paths in different places since then at Nicole Masters' class and branching for profit circles and things. So I've kind of watched Joe and was blessed to be able to go and visit his ranch, one of the ranches that he manages, on my way home from Southern California. I believe it was in 2021, and I'd spent 10 days at a Savory Institute intensive training. And during those 10 days, we could not find any perennial grasses on all the pasture walks that we did. It was a complete annual system had evolved because of prior management, and very little even perennial shrub and tree recruitment. And what there was older. And so I question, is this just kind of how all California is? I didn't even know what a Mediterranean climate was until I went there, and I learned a lot. It's complete different. Well, not complete different, but very different than the Great Basin Desert, where my context is, where I grew up. But then as I drove a few hours further north from where that class was, and spent the night, and the next morning, Joe was kind enough to, at a very short notice, meet me, and we jumped on his side-by-side and toured one of the ranches, and he started to point out some of the perennial grass species, some of the oak recruitment on the landscape there that he managed, and also, notice the health of the livestock that were there, and just a very inviting environment. And I thought, he's got some things figured out. And so, and with that background, we're sure grateful to have you here, Joe. Grateful that you're part of this. And let's how long have you been ranching?
Well, I'm really honored to be here, Jared. I definitely remember that Bud Williams class and your visit to the ranch, and I've admired your work as well, and all the things you're trying to do to support this community. I think it's really amazing, and so I'm glad to be here. I've been ranching, and I'll kind of get into the next couple slides. Kind of gives you want to kind of introduce myself. in the
Yeah.
context in which I'm working, because context, as you just mentioned, is just key. Knowing it and understanding it as far as we can. Um, so my family's been in the ranching business for a long time, 5 generations in California. They were here before the gold rush, and but I was raised in San Francisco because my mom was the rancher, but she moved to San Francisco to marry my dad, who was an attorney. So I was raised in San Francisco, but my mom and dad tell me I was born with my boots on. So when I got to the ranch, I was home. I just knew very deeply that this is kind of what I love to be, and here I am.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Well, we appreciate that, and we're going to jump right in. Kind of the way these things roll is Joe's got a bit of a presentation he's going to share, and then we'll open it up for some question and answers, and then I'll do a short wrap up at the end. If you lose service, if you're not able to join for the full time, this recording, the video recording, will go on our podcast channel, which is the Profitable Steward, or the Profitable Ag Steward, I think it is. Look for that on YouTube. And the audio will go out on the Profitable Steward. I always encourage people to go to YouTube. You can get, the pictures say 1,000 words. And so you can get more of the meaning behind the presentation if you go there and actually watch it. So yeah, let's jump right in, Joe.
Okay. So I'm going to set a timer so I have an idea. I titled this thing Grazing Purpose and Planning. And the reason I did it is because I think all of us on this call are looking to live purposeful lives. And I certainly was as a young person, and still am. And as I've gotten into the management of grazing, my understanding has evolved about what the purpose is. And I think it's very helpful to kind of consider that, because then that gives us some information about how to plan to achieve that purpose, and to fulfill it, and to live in concert with it. So that's kind of how it, and I also, graze it this way because it basically connects us to all things. So no matter what we talk about here, it's going to be connected, and that's good. So by way of introduction, this is my wife, Julie, and I, and our beef business, which emerged from our management of land and animals, is called Morris Grass-Fed Beef. And we will talk about that in the last third of my talk. But to set the stage, I think what undergirds the quality of that beef, or the beef in any case, is the land and our management or stewardship of it. So that's where we're going to go. And but to begin with, as I said earlier, a little bit about our context. We live in San Juan Bautista. It's on the central coast of California. This ranch on your screen is one of the ranches, two of the ranches actually we manage, and we manage in the central coast. These two ranches are about 10 miles from the coast. Our inland ranches are about 40 miles from the coast. And we manage quite intensively, and we use the holistic planning process because the complexity of this, on 4 land ownership, 3 different ranch units, 1 is a state park. It just is mind-bendingly complex. And if we didn't have some management process to help us, we wouldn't be able to. It would be so stressful, it just wouldn't be fun at all. And it is a lot of fun. So that's the good news. We have 7 to 10 million neighbors within 120 million miles, or 120 miles, and that's part of our context. We have a growing season in the winter and spring, November through May. Annual precipitation, it's 20 inches near the coast, 14 inches inland. We have a variety of soils, some sandy loam to clay. As you can see in this photograph, we manage in very steep canyons, steep hills, Some of them you really don't want to ride up and down on. They can be extremely slick in the early winter, and mostly populated by annual grasses. Most ranches in California have 95+% of annual plants covering them, and 5% or even less of perennial grasses. The oak trees are not regenerating well on most rangelands. There's a lot of forbs, which account for a huge part of the diversity, and there's a lot of weeds. 4 ranches is part of our program. 1 is a state park, and we have 4 enterprises. We have Morris Grass Fed, which is our beef marketing direct-to-consumer business. We manage a contract grazing business, which is the majority of our animals. We manage about 1,500 animals on 2 different ranches in the winter and spring. We have a small cow-calf operation, and we have Morris Grass-fed animals as well, grazing with us. And we also have a small clamping site, which Julie has created, and it's brilliant. It's 100% drought resilient, and has been quite profitable. There's 1 full-time employee and me. Julie works, she has her own job, so she doesn't work too much for Morris Grass Fed, but does some vital things as well. Like I said, we have a pioneering ranching family. Born and raised in San Francisco. I studied the Great Books program in college, which figures into the way I think about things. I came in and out of ranching as a young man several times because I couldn't quite understand or connect my love of ranching with the common good. You know, how were these things connected? And I didn't understand that. And so I left ranching and did a couple other things, and then finally came back into ranching after discovering the work of Alan Savory and Wendell Berry, and they started helping me connect the dots. And I am indebted, I should say off the top, to lots of wonderful teachers, Bud Williams, Christine Jones, Peter Donovan, as we were talking about, Alan Savory, Tom Dorrance. I've had some amazing teachers, and so if any, I hope something will be of use today in our discussions. And but it largely came from them and the plants and animals that I engage with on a daily basis. Ranching, or the management of grazing, requires management of complex systems. And I want to distinguish complexity from complicated, because I think that's helpful. Complicated systems are more like accounting systems or a machine, and they have certain properties. Complex systems require a different kind of management. They require engagement. They're all about relationships. And relationships require you to be present to what you are relating to. If it's a friend and you go out to coffee or have them over for dinner, you need to be present to them to understand how they're doing, where the conversation is going to go, what's the look on their face, what's how are they feeling, and all these things are only possible if you are engaged with that system. So that's a complex system, and it's derived from the French word, which means to manage or ride a horse in dressage. And all of you who know how to ride a horse know that if you read about it in a book and went and jumped on a horse and that's all you knew, it might not go very well. So we need to engage, we need to put pressure on things, we need to release pressure, we need to observe, we need to remember, and we need to learn. And that's almost a quotation from Tom Dorrance, who said that's how he does what he does. And it's a system that is better served by heuristics or rules of thumb rather than hard and fast rules, because things are dynamic, they're changing, they're multidimensional. And that's why the holistic management framework, which is also on the screen, is so valuable. It helps us sort of corral, if you will, the complexity into things that we can plan for and look at and observe and monitor, and we never have complete control over it, but we can manage it in a way like riding a horse. We can do a really beautiful job riding a horse, managing land, managing our relationships. It's an uphill endeavor. It requires energy. And like these cattle going up the hill, if we weren't managing ourselves and them in a way that they found congenial, they wouldn't go uphill. And how many times have we fought animals and found them going completely contrary to where we wanted them to go? And if we can stop and understand what's happening and back off a little bit, take a breath, be present, and things can change very quickly. So it's an uphill endeavor, but requiring energy, but the energy is abundant. It's basically an exchange between a hungry grazing animal and an individual plant. It's an exchange of goods and services. Food for the pruning of leaves. That's the service. And in California, we have various pictures here of different grazing, photos of grazing. And but that's not all it is. It's not just between the plant and the grazer, because we know in intact wild systems, the benefits offered to the plants by the grazing animal are mediated by the behavior of predators, which are fed by the grazer. And anybody who's knows anything about holistic management, that's kind of where we started. We're like, oh, there's this behavior that's induced by this other relationship that affects the relationship between the grazer and the grass. But there's even more than that. And as time has gone on, and our ability to see smaller and smaller things, there's been a lot of amazing discoveries about the benefits offered to the grazing animal, which are facilitated by the activities of soil microbes, which are fed by the plant root exudates. And this has been a real epiphany for me, because it's led to all sorts of opportunities that I have not seen before I understood this, to manage the grazing or manage the relationship between the plants and the grass better. So the subject of grazing management is the relationship between people, animals, plants, and microbes. It's an endeavor that we all are engaged in that connects to all things, from the microbes in the soil and the guts of animals to money economies and the atmospheric gases that influence climate. That is the work we do, and it is work that is necessary to do well, or it is essential. It's essential work to the health of the whole planet. That is not what we read about in popular media. They do not understand that the work we are doing is essential to the health of the whole planet. But we're here to talk about that, and I'm gonna make some arguments that it is essential. One of the things that I've learned about this underworld, under the soil life, and I've learned it from Christine Jones. She's an amazing teacher. She has got lots of information online, lots of talks. And if you listen to her for long enough, you get your head around these ideas, and you will see opportunities as well. One of the things she talks about that is kind of a new thing for many of us is that there are two paths that carbon dioxide takes when they enter a plant through the process of photosynthesis. One of the paths is the decomposing. It produces the plant. Sugars come into the plant through photosynthesis. It produces the body of the plant, the leaves, the shoots, the seeds, and all these things. And those parts of the plant can be eaten by animals. They can be trampled by animals. They can lay on the top of the soil and protect the soil surface. And those plant parts break down through biological decomposition. And that's one path for carbon to come into the soil. That is a relatively short-term carbon life in the soil. Almost all of that carbon is consumed by microorganisms, bacteria, and fungi, and respired, breathed out, just like you and I. When we inhale oxygen. When we exhale, we exhale carbon. That's what those microbes are doing. And it's really handy for the plants because the plants can take that carbon dioxide, which is emitted just beneath their bodies through the stomata in their leaves, and they can grow. It's a very efficient process. But there's a second path for carbon through photosynthesis. And this is a really important thing for us to understand as managers of grazing, because this second way that plants move carbon into the soil is through a liquid carbon pathway. That's what Christine Jones has called it. And it leaks out basically through roots and into the soil rhizosphere, and it nourishes microbes. And like the grazer has a relationship with the plant, trading goods and services like we talked about, so do the microbes. Microbes take liquid from the plants, this liquid carbon, glucose, sugars, and they bring to the plant through mycorrhizal networks, which are these vast networks of tiny filaments. They bring to the plant nutrients that the plant needs, water if the plant needs it. They help balance all kinds of things for the plant and help that plant to grow well and really nourishing for the cow or the people who come along and eat that plant. So it's a really amazing relationship that we can't see except through a microscope, and people can see it. And if you ever get a chance to see it, it literally blows your mind. But there's a tension, which is why it's important to understand for grazer, because there's a tension between how these pathways work. There's a tension between a plant in a vegetative state and a plant in a reproductive state. Once the plant moves into reproduction, all of the carbon coming into it through photosynthesis is no longer going into the soil. It is going into the plant to build up its shoots, stems, and the seed itself, and the next generation. That's kind of how things are working that way. So if we want to build soil carbon through grazing, we have to understand that when the plant is vegetative, we can do that. We can move liquid carbon into the soil where it goes down into to feed the mycorrhizal fungi, which then live, do their thing, and when they die, they become necromass. And the necromass can actually bond with mineral elements, and it can become very, very stable. And for thousands of years, it's basically like a rock. And this tension is what we are about in grazing planning, and I never knew that until relatively recently. There are also, I think it's helpful to me to understand that there are three broad classes of microbes. And I'm not a scientist, so you'll take all this with a grain of salt. Learn more from Dr. Jones, but this is basically what has helped me, my understanding. There's bacteria, there's saprotrophic fungi. Those are the fungi that are decomposers, and they take the bodies of plants, the detritus in the soil, they consume it, they respire carbon dioxide. They do a lot of amazing things in the soil as well, but they are not when we say let's build, feed the fungi that will then build soil, the saprotrophs are not that group. They are the group that is using the detritus, the plant litter. That doesn't build stable carbon. We need to be moving liquid carbon down to where the mycorrhizal fungi are, and that will help us build soil carbon. And that all of a sudden there's a lot of opportunities for understanding how we manage our grazing feeds one or other or of these microbes, and they have different effects. Management of grazing affects all three through different means. though different means affect the decomposing carbon pathway and the liquid carbon pathway. Saprotrophs live in the top 30 centimeters of soil, generally speaking. They consume various forms of carbon, but mostly are decomposers. This is the quick cycling carbon that we talked about, and it returns to the atmosphere as CO2. So all the times when people are saying, well, let's add compost to the soil, that's the kind of carbon that they're adding to the soil, and that generally is the result. Unless it can be a biostimulant, it is a biostimulant, and that can increase the chances that carbon can move into the soil through this other pathway. But the saprotrophs are not building long-term stable carbon. That's the mycorrhizal fungi. And so as grazing managers, we should take note. Management seeks, I believe, to develop a virtuous cycle. In grazing context, we are trying to go from bare ground or low successional plant communities to a soil carbon sponge. And you can thank Walter Yene for that language. And this sort of is a view of it, and it continually cycles. There is no stopping point, and that's what we can do as managers. We can develop that virtuous cycle, and the best way to do it, I think, is to increase the length of the season of green, because through lengthening the season of green, we can enhance the capacity of the microbes in the soil to stabilize soil carbon. They then can build soil aggregates, which creates pore spaces in the soil, and in that space there can be air and there can be water, and when you have air and water and nutrients delivered to the plants, everything works so much better. You're more resilient to drought, floods, etc. Profitability increases because we have a longer season of green, and everybody knows that the cattle are going to do better on green grass, growing grass. So in order to do this management, I've used, as I said before, the holistic grazing processes. I believe it's vital, if you don't use this, that whatever plans we make have to be on paper. It helps our mind sort of concentrate and focus on the task at hand. It reminds us of what our thoughts were. We can create a record. We can create plans for the future. We can take advantage of opportunities, but it's not enough, because in a complex system, we have to engage. So Alan came up with this feedback loop where you plan, and then you monitor, and you control when things are not going to plan, and then you replan. And it's a continuous process, that's part of the life cycle, which is what we're managing, and we're part of it. But what do you do when the experts disagree? And anybody that goes on to YouTube or on the podcasts, even in this group, you're going to find out that people do disagree on these things. And that's okay, because people are managing in different contexts. So when the experts disagree, you're managing complexity. So what do you have to do? Well, Bud Williams was a very wise person and said just some amazing things. And one of the things that I wrote down is, he said, if you go out and do what you want to do, you often create problems that you cannot handle. However, if you go out to do what you need to do, things will turn out just fine. And he was talking about a cattle herd, but I think it's applicable to any situation of complexity. And so what you need to do, that is monitoring. You go out and you see what is needed. You can't know until you get there, even if you have a great plan. If you have a great plan and go away for 6 months, it's probably not going to go according to plan. There's just too many variables. So monitoring, my friend Peter Donovan says, is the best practice when you're managing complexity. And one of the things he suggests we can do is we can learn to ask better questions. Many of our monitoring questions are like this, the judging questions. Do I like it? Is it good or bad? Are we doing good or best practices? Do my neighbors like it? Is this what the experts say? But those are judging questions, and they don't really help us engage with what is going on. They don't help us observe. We tend to judge and stop observing. Learning questions, on the other hand, are another mode of interacting with your system, your management, the land, the animals. What results am I seeing? What are the conditions that are bringing about these results? What conditions will enable what we need if they're not being created right now? What evidence is there of how water or energy is cycling, for example? These are examples of learning questions, and I think they're much more helpful. They get our minds thinking about what's in front of our face, and too often we don't have the presence or sometimes the confidence to actually look at what's happening right in front of our face. So I'm always thinking about leading indicators of animal performance, because if I'm looking at lagging indicators of performance, things can be way wrong right in front of my face, and I'm looking at the wrong thing. So leading indicators of animal performance, and many of you are experts in all of these things, so I'm just the one on the microphone, but you may be considerably better than I am. But what I look for is the contentment of the animals, generally, their gut fill, the manure. For the animals, I want to see them have clean water. I want to see them drinking, getting up, exercising, things like that. For the land, leading indicators of landscape function would be, and these come from the 5 or 6 principles of soil health developed by the NRCS. Is the soil covered? Are there living roots? Is there biodiversity? Now, Christine Jones complicates this a little bit, because she says biodiversity, if you just have species diversity, you might only have a monoculture. In other words, if you have a grassland, quote unquote, that is just grasses, the ability for those plants to do all you would like them to do in terms of landscape function, building soil, storing carbon, creating nutritionally dense plants, that is limited unless you have a diversity of plant families. Anybody with Seek Naturalist on their phone, it's an app. You can take a picture of a plant. Maybe you can do it, I think, through Apple as well. But you can take a picture of a plant and you can look up that plant and figure out what the plant family is. Anyway, so there's a list of things that we can look at as leading indicators of plant health, land health, and this will give us immediate feedback that then we can act on and make sure that our plans are going according to plan, or what we need to do to bring them back into plan. Soil temperatures, is there decomposing litter, etc. So the result that we're looking for is an increased photosynthetic capacity and increased photosynthetic rate. More green is a short way to think about it. And if you think, this is one of our ranches that we lucked out and got an aerial photograph of. This was actually in 1995, so it was a long time ago, but it still illustrates the point, I think, quite well. Inside this gray perimeter is our management, TOCC, is TO Cattle Company. Outside is a variety of things. There's rest, there's grazing, there's mowing, there's rest, and invariably all the way around it, if you try to take the same slope and aspect, there is more green inside TO Cattle Company's management. And that's because we were producing increased photosynthetic rate by our management. And this has really spurred me on over the years to try to figure out, how can we do this better? How can we do it on a more global scale? And so that's kind of the enterprise I'm on. Sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. And where I am on this, the experts disagree, for example, on length of recovery period, how much you're supposed to graze. And there's all kinds of ideas about, well, you should have very, very long recovery periods, or you should have, plants that only get grazed 50%, or you should just graze the top half and you can come back much sooner. And all of these ideas, all of which may bear looking at more closely, but they have to be managed in context. And one of the things I've been doing for a long time is I've been planning my recovery periods and making them fairly long. And what I was finding is that uh, the animal performance would go down because the plants would get too mature. And I also found that the plants would get bigger because there was more lignin in them, but they weren't necessarily staying green long. What I found would help them stay green longer is if I actually, at certain times of the year, shortened the recovery period. That I never would have thought to do if I were just kind of going by the book. But if I'm not going by the book and I'm actually looking at the land and looking at the animals and how they're doing and looking at the land at how the plants are actually doing, I changed. It took me a long time, but I really like the results. And I'm thinking that the planning term of most of these planning processes is a season or a year. And I'm kind of thinking that we need to think a little bit longer term. Because if I'm going to shorten the recovery period on, one zone of my ranch this year, I probably don't want to do that again next year because I want everything to go to seed next year. So I have to diversify my management strategies over time, keeping the eye on the ball that we want to enhance the greenness as much as possible. So through all of that management and greenness, we have Morris grass-fed beef. And I just wanted to kind of go through briefly. I don't know how many people are interested in direct marketing. You have to have the right, if I can find my notes here, you have to have the right context. We have a lot of customers near. And so we decided that was our marketing was our weak link. And we had good cattle, but we weren't getting as much money as we'd like to. So we basically, and I'll just briefly describe it. We in the fall of the year, we want 8 to 9 weight, mostly heifers, but we can do steers as well. And we want to slaughter them when they're fat. Sometimes that's 1150, sometimes it's 1300 pounds, but they are fat. Fat is a pretty color. We need high quality forage. That's part of the context. In California, we don't have it year round. We have good quality forage in the winter and spring. And then I have a partner that grazes our cattle up in Northern California with very good forage in the summer. So we can harvest and we can grow our animals over almost 9 months, and that produces predictably good quality meat. We have a USDA slaughter plant. Our processor has the capacity to do USDA processing, cut and wrap, but we opted to do just custom exempt because we don't need to do the USDA inspection in the way that we deliver beef to our customers, which is basically quarters, halves, and wholes. The processor cuts and wraps and divides into split halves or halves. So we never touch it until it comes in these boxes that you'll see in the lower part, and my dogs are guarding in my pickup. So we don't touch it except in those boxes. I work with our butcher. We have a wonderful family butcher, and he's fantastic. We pick the beef. We take the animals 7 head at a time. It's pretty small, which is a pain and a cost, but that's how we can do it. We deliver 7 head at a time to get slaughtered. Then we pick up in a freezer truck, as you see on the right, 14 head, and then we deliver to our customers. We pick it up in the morning at the butcher. It's frozen and in these boxes, and we meet our customers at various locations in the Central Coast and down through the Bay Area, and our truck is empty by the time we get home. So that's how we do that. We market through very simple means. We have a very good website that Julie made, and she's very good at it. We use a little bit of Instagram. We write a few newsletters. through email, and that's our marketing program. We sell about 100 head a year, and we use our website and another website called GrazeCart to help us organize our customers and deliveries. And it's really fun to meet the customers, and they pay us, about basically $5,000 a head, and that's a pretty good gross margin even at today's prices of very, very high cattle market. So I think that's about what I'd like to cover. And so Jared, back to you.
Thanks, Joe. That is a great overview. So we're going to open it up for some question and answers here. I guess with your background, and I think it's pretty awesome, that you went more of the liberal arts route rather than the in your schooling, rather than getting an animal science degree.
Nice.
And that's actually what we encourage our kids to do. I think that's pretty awesome. Like, you'll figure out how to do the technical stuff, but learn how to think and how to think objectively. And so what was it that got you started on the more holistic management, or what we might now today call regenerative management?
Right. Well, like I said, my thinking evolved. Initially, as my boss said, I was a young cowboy in the Great Basin, running around the desert, looking at my shadow and thinking how grand I looked, me and my horse and my hat and everything. And but that was not enough. I mean, I enjoyed it obviously, and loved starting colts and the cowboying and so forth, but it wasn't enough ultimately. So I left. I left the ranch and went to work in Latin America, actually, with in a very poor area of Venezuela, and I worked with the poor for about 2 years, and that was eye opening as well. And then I came back, and I went to grad school for a short time, and when it was summer, I decided what I do in the summer is to go work on ranches. So I went back to Nevada and never went back to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And then but my predisposition was that, how do I serve the whole? How do I serve my community? And that was really important to me, and that was a question that was on my mind, and I needed to go through a lot of things in order to figure out what that meant. And then, like I said, I discovered the work of Wendell Berry, and he blew my mind in connecting agriculture and civilization. And then I found I lived in a group house in Washington D.C. for a while, and one of my housemates said, "Hey, you need to look at this." And it was an article by Sam Bingham about Alan Savory's work, and that was it. That was like, oh, that is exactly what I'm doing, and I'm headed back to California to see if I can do it. And so that's how it was, just immediately attractive to me. It was so coherent, and just a beautiful theory and way of looking at it, and it just fit my values to a T.
Beautiful. Appreciate that. I see your wife, Julie, is on here as well. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and fill in any of the gaps, or at least just say hi to the audience, we'd love to have you.
Hi, Jared. Thanks. I'm driving, so I'll just make this brief. But yeah, Joe and I have been on this journey for 30 plus years together, and it's never been boring. I will tell you that. And yeah, I just appreciate all the people on the call today. It's encouraging to see young people think of agriculture, specifically regenerative agriculture, as a career and a larger purpose. So thank you.
Very good. What would you say is there were like one or two key takeaways or lessons that you've learned through this process, Julie, that you might share with the audience?
I would say just to keep an open mind and to never stop learning. I think one of the beauties of the holistic model that Joe talked about that Alan Savory developed is to assume wrong. And we have certainly learned from plenty of our mistakes. And I think that if you consider those opportunities, it helps you to stay optimistic and to keep growing and to keep being profitable, or at least working towards profitability.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Thanks for multitasking and jumping on here.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks for supporting Joe in this venture as well, being on here. So, yeah, so if anybody has questions, you can type them in the chat and I'll facilitate that. We also do kind of a quick informal Q&A, more of a mastermind type after we cut the recording. So you can definitely stick around for a few minutes after that. If you're a little camera shy or you don't want to be on record, I get that. Just curious, Joe, you've had the blessing and opportunity to work with some of the greats, like Bud Williams and the Dorances, and probably Ray Hunt as well, I assume.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Anything specifically from these gentlemen that are no longer with us and their families? We talk about the men, but I mean, Eunice is, I don't think Bud would have been able to do what he does. And he's the one that I know the best. Bud wouldn't have been able to do what he did without Eunice. And
Right.
So they maybe are the ones that are out in front, but certainly their wives, their children, their families played a huge part in that. But are there any lessons that stand out in your mind from some of these legendary people that you were able to be mentored by that you'd like to share with the group?
Well, I think my takeaway from virtually all those people is that they were extraordinary learners. They were students primarily, and they studied complex systems, whether it was horses or cattle or markets. And they all spoke in somewhat, it was challenging for them to teach. So they spoke in terms of principles, these heuristics that I said, these rules of thumb. Tom would say, make the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. And that's a principle. And so many of us blew that principle up because we made the wrong thing so darn difficult that the horse just quit the country or bucked us off. But I think that was their gift, and the gift they shared with me primarily was the confidence to go out and engage with whatever you need to learn, and the confidence that if you stick with it and you don't lose your mind and get upset, and you will find a way to get the animals to walk uphill and do what you want, or go through the gate, or whatever you're trying to get them to do that seems impossible, or the landscape. Same thing. You might have been banging your head against the wall, trying to get your land a certain way. And I've done this too. And one of my failures is to not go out and do the monitoring, or not understand what to look for. And so I think it's really, and Peter Donovan is big on this, is to try to create learning groups, learning communities, because two heads are better than one. And we badly need to learn as quickly as we can, because all of us are in challenging businesses, challenging environments, and so on. And so we have to become excellent students. And there's a Chinese proverb that goes something like this: the teachers are everywhere. All that is wanted is a student. And that's us.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's good. Maybe we'll do one more question, then I'll do a wrap up here, but talk a little bit about the role of livestock. And I mean, you've hinted at that, but specifically around land regeneration and what you've been able to do to speed speed up succession, to be able to sequester carbon, to be able to increase biodiversity. And I don't know if we'd give enough credence to that, especially in brittle environments, of how integral livestock are to healing the landscape. And as we all know, overgrazing certainly happens, mismanagement certainly happens. But can you speak a little bit about that, of what you've seen in the decades of proper management of livestock, and how it helps the system um, to heal quicker, I guess?
Well, it does. And I think that I hope that aerial photograph illustrates that point pretty well. Because that was 1 year's management. And all of a sudden we had 2 or 3 weeks of green more than our neighbors did. And it was because of the way we managed the grazing. And I'm not at all perfect in these things, and I learn every day, and it's exciting to learn. But over the years, we've seen, particularly on the coast, we've seen native grasses move from, 5 to 10% cover to almost 30% cover on a lot of the ranches. And we've seen native oak trees, which are not regenerating on grazed lands generally. They've regenerated in abundance, possibly too much.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things are happening because we have laid down plant litter, we've allowed recovery of plants and so forth. And those things are associated with these saprotrophic fungi. Okay. And it's a really important thing. What I'm trying to do now is, and I didn't even understand that there was different kinds of fungi and that they actually played different roles in carbon sequestration and so forth, and soil building. But there's the mycorrhizal fungi that are symbiotic with and there's the decomposers. And to understand that gives me an opportunity to refine my grazing so that I can enhance the green on our land, I think, more rapidly and more effectively. And it was pretty extraordinary this year, where, I was out there every day trying to understand what would be the effect, because I was assuming wrong, because this is contrary to what I've been learning for the last 30 years, is to bring animals back sooner than full recovery. But so I was really watching carefully to see how that happened. Am I going to bear the soil? Am I going to overgraze plants? Well, if you think about overgrazing, some people think of it almost as a moral issue. It cannot ever happen. Well, that's not how nature operates. Nature is not moralistic. It's very practical. And sometimes a plant will take a second, or a cow will take a second bite, or a bison, or whatever, or the animals will come back. But what happens when they come back is those plants stay vegetative more for longer. And when they do that, they are adding carbon to the soil, and they are building the resilience of that system. So as long as that doesn't happen every year, those plants, you can take advantage of that plant's ability to feed the mycorrhizal fungi through the liquid carbon pathway. And if you're following a recipe that Alan told me, or that somebody told me, and Alan doesn't say this, he says plan, monitor, control, replan. That's what he really says.
Yeah.
And we might disagree about some of the details, and that's okay. It's your responsibility and your gift, frankly, to be steward of this land. And you're the only one that can do it, because there's billions of hectares around the earth that need attention and need care. And we're the only ones that can do it, because we're not bringing back the lions and tigers and grizzly bears in California, right?
Yeah.
And there's 40 million acres in California that need attention badly, because they are in a degraded state, and we are having floods in the lowlands, droughts every other couple of years. It's heating up. I mean, a very interesting monitoring thing that I do is I get a little soil temperature thermometer, and you can go out and you can measure covered soil and bare soil just to pique your interest. And it's amazing how big of a difference there will be. In California, on a day that the ambient temperature was 79 degrees, there was a 25-degree difference in covered and bare soil,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's much greater differences than that, but that was one that I remember.
Yeah. Well said. We appreciate that. Appreciate you leading by example and being able to show that it can be done, and that could be done at scale as well. This isn't a backyard trial. This is definitely at scale and for profit as well, right?
Right.
And I think, to me, that just speaks volume of the credibility of this type of management.
Yeah.
And so thank you, Joe. Thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for leading by example.
Thank you for
So,
having me. Appreciate it.
you bet. So just kind of to wrap up here, I'm gonna drop in the chat a link. So we've got a couple of events coming up. We do these webinars twice a month, on the second and fourth Thursdays, generally, excepting Thanksgiving. Here in the United States, we'll do these live. We encourage you to jump on here live. You can find, we're building out a website and some things, but we have landing pages. You can look for us on Facebook. Most of the regenerative agricultural groups, we post our stuff there. That's one of the best ways to connect. The next event here is going to be a summit. It's a multi-day summit. We have some pretty awesome speakers, just like Joe has been on here as well. And I'll kind of walk you through what this looks like. So if you just navigate to that link that I shared, which is not as straightforward as we need it to be. We'll see if we can create a little bit simpler link, but legacy.agsteward.co/my first name, Jared, and initial S, legacy.agsteward.co/Jared S for now. So anyway, what this is the 13th and 14th from 9 to approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. We have a multi-speaker summit. So just navigate to that page. You can see here's kind of a lineup of who our speakers are. I'm going to be the host. We're actually blessed to have our team secure Joel Salatin. I said, how did you do that? I said, we asked. I said, well, great. He's going to be our keynote. We have some other amazing speakers that are coming on, all around the idea of building a legacy business that can last for generations. To do that, it needs to be profitable now, and we need to regenerate the landscape along the way. And so grateful to have many of these speakers here with us, all working within their own context, within their own, most of them, are producers as well. They walk the walk. So basically, you just go there. There's a couple opportunities to be able to hit the register now button. That takes you to this page. Put in your name, phone number, and this is a free event. And absolutely encourage you to jump on and join. It'll be via Zoom. And we've found, you can look at the testimonials at the bottom of the page of people that have been. Even though it's Zoom, you gain tons of value by being able to sit at the feet of some of these people, and you don't have to travel. So autofill your information, hit register. That takes you to the next page. Maybe if it goes here. All right. Yep. That's going to be me. You get to watch a short video. There's also a bonus session, which is kind of the VIP experience. The summit is going to be pretty high level, multiple speakers. This VIP experience is another event happening towards the end of August. And so you can register for that. That's going to be where we're going to break it down and work on your business. It's going to be more hands-on, learning, interactive, a more tight-knit group, breakout sessions. The idea is that you walk away with that, from that experience, with clear action steps for your business, to build a legacy business, to be regenerative, to, as Joel Salatin says, romance that next generation into agriculture. So we hope you can join us. If you are on the email list, you're going to be getting that information. I think the team just got this out today, and so it'll also be available on the the social media as well. So it shouldn't be too hard to find if you just search for the Regenerative Legacy Summit. It should pull that up pretty easily for you. And yeah, definitely, we hope you can join us, and look forward to having you there. So again, Joe, any final thoughts before we cut the recording here? Anything maybe that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
Oh, I just think what you're doing, Jared, is really amazing. This is a great way to connect to all these bright, energetic people who are trying to do the right thing and have a tremendous amount of capacity. So I applaud you. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and thanks everybody for joining here live. Thanks to those that are watching the replay or the recording. We hope to see your faces on Zoom here soon. And with that, we'll log off. Thanks everybody.